In today's information world, the concepts of fakes and information hygiene are becoming increasingly important. Hoaxes or false information messages can spread instantly thanks to social networks and the media. These endangers not only informational security, but also public discourse and faith in the objectivity of information. And we have such information, accurate and proven. Please welcome Karolina Ashion.
Today we are going to delve into the world of Russian propaganda and its portrayal of Ukraine and the Ukrainian government. Regardless of how you may have heard them referred to, Russian propaganda is delivered with extreme confidence and audacity. Russian journalists are unparalleled in their ability to weave intricate falsehoods. So, what methods are currently employed by Russian media outlets? How are these narratives disseminated against Ukraine? And what are Russia's intentions in influencing the perception of Europeans? Stay tuned as we explore these questions in this episode. In recent years, Russian propaganda has been actively building grounds for invasion of Ukraine. The themes of hatred of Ukrainians, demonization of Ukraine, and various pseudo-historical narratives that Ukraine does not exist, that it is a fake state and must be captured and liberated were raised. Now the domestic audience of Russia must be constantly explained while this war must continue, for which the Russian authorities are sending their people to die. At first, the Russian media promoted the message of justifying why Russia attacked Ukraine. They said that Ukraine is militarizing and NATO can then use Ukraine to attack the Russian Federation. Therefore, the Kremlin went ahead. In addition, the Russian media and politicians constantly talk about the need to denazify Ukraine and also that Russia did not attack Ukraine but protected the people of Donbas. Propaganda narratives are now drifted to the point that if Russia loses this war, everyone will suffer. Military propagandists increasingly say that this is a holy war, that this is a war for values, for the existence of Russia itself. As noted in the Jamestown Foundation think tank, Russian propaganda develops several narratives. The first and main propaganda narratives can be labeled as killing for peace. The second narrative is victory at any cost. This stage of propaganda takes a much more cynical approach. In this case, propaganda no longer tries to prove that the war was justified, but emphasizes that we have no other way out but victory. Another narrative is war is necessary for the purification of society. According to the propagandists, on the one hand, this is a cleansing of traitors and corrupt officials. And everything that can't be explained, no matter how qualitatively, is translated into religion by Russian propaganda. For example, in the Russian church, there are narratives that the war is necessary in order to unite Holy Russia, and in their vision, Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. And now the time for the questions and answers. And I'd like to present to my guest, Oleksandr Zamkovoi, fact-checker and at StopFake organization. So, Oleksandr, nice to talk to you.
Nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
We have really very essential and important topic, I think. So, how has Russian propaganda evolved recently? What do you think?
Well, Russian propaganda is stable in spreading the disinformation narratives because actually we can call Russian propaganda a coordinated governmental policy aiming at achieving the geopolitical results. So it has strict rules because when we invest in propaganda, you need to make sure that all your narratives, they are still alive. So the major narratives that were spread even before the full-scale invasion, before 2022, they are still alive. They try to convince the world that Ukraine is a failed state, that they have the cultural and historical rights to fight the lands in Ukraine, to fight Ukrainian people. They say that actually we are one nation, let's say one people, like Russians and Ukrainians. And and it's like the war was started by the Western countries, not Russia. So Russia is pretending to be a victim of this war. And like before 2022, of course, they were trying to polarize the population in Ukraine. This was the religious aspects and the language aspects, Russian, Ukrainian language, etc. But for European countries, they were trying to promote the narrative that Ukraine is kind of weak. Nobody will fight for Ukraine as a country. And in case Russia, like starting with the war in Ukraine, most likely Ukraine will give up. So that's why, of course, European countries were not prepared at all for helping us. And they really thought that there is no potential in Ukrainian society that someone will stand for Ukraine and for the state of Ukraine. And now what we see is almost the same, because they try to now convince Ukrainians through different channels that Western allies won't support Ukraine for long, because now it's, there is a war in Israel, Israeli Hamas conflict, and, the support of the Western world will be moved toward this part of the world, and Ukraine will be left aside. And that's why Ukrainians probably should think about giving up. It's at least those territories which are occupied already by Russia. And of course, they also try to promote the panicking in Ukrainian society, that the war will last very long. And again, like this winter will be very harsh. And this will never stop, because Russia is a very strong enemy. And they try to convince us that we simply don't have enough resources for fighting. Actually, this is one of the components of convincing us in this narrative is the reflexive control. This lies in the center of the Russian propaganda. This methodology is used for convincing your enemy, let's say, that he or she is weaker than he or she is in reality, because you try to control the decisions of the opponent by trying to convince them that they are actually weaker, and it's better not to fight back and just give up. While at the same time, your enemy can be actually very strong and have enough of power to fight back. But from the psychological point of view, when reflexive control is kind of successful, your opponent, this is like a moral thing, of course. So when you see it, you can actually see a lot of stuff like that in sport, when the opponents try to depress morally themselves, because if you know that somebody is really stronger than you are and have the potential, let's say in this war we have like more potential on the technological side, because we have better equipment and better military. But of course, Russia is afraid of the weapon that are provided by the Western allies. So they try to convince ourselves still we are weaker than they are. So yes, this is like one of the components which can be used as well.
So it's obvious, absolutely, that Russia will never ever lose the opportunity to spread the fake about Ukraine in the world, in the whole world. In your opinion, which lie or situation with Russian propaganda was the most absurd?
We at StopFake, we debunk plenty of absurd fakes, unfortunately, because the Russian propaganda is working mostly. They produce the large variety of fakes. So we talk about the quantities, not the qualities, because quality of them is rather poor, and a lot of them we can debunk, but we can't debunk all of them because the quantity is so big. The volume of fakes they produce each day is so high that actually anyway they spread, and we can debunk everything. So what we say to our subscribers and to our audience is that you just need to understand. Of course, like we know that Russia is an enemy, but in European countries, for example, you need to know the basic narratives that Russia spread about Ukraine in order to understand that this information is fake, for example, because actually fakes that they produce on a daily basis, they feed the narrative, because narrative is something very stable. we can say that they have like now up to 12 active narratives that they spread all the time, but they feed them with fakes. And that is why like fact checkers like our organization and other organizations in the world, there are plenty of fact checker organizations in each country, they debunk those fakes because nowadays fakes are the weapon, the informational weapon aiming at, again, achieving the geopolitical goals. So the most, I don't know, let me just think about the most ridiculous one. The Satanists in the Ukrainian army, there are plenty of fakes like that, saying that actually Ukrainian military, they are Satanists actually, and they were trying to convince their audience that they find a lot of stuff with the very demonic faces and puppets, etc., like voodoo. I don't know. This was it was very ridiculous, and we laughed a lot about that. But for those who do not understand that, and for Europeans, this can be rather fragile, this information. Also, they manipulate a lot with the statements of our politicians. For example, in France, there was once in this spring a huge fake spread about the latest statements of Volodymyr Zelensky, saying that he actually is asking European Union countries to make a nuclear strike in Russia, so to hit Russia with a nuclear weapon, and which wasn't the case, of course, because he said that we have to make a preventive strike, saying that the sanctions imposed on Russia had to be more stricter than they are now. So there was not any tokens about the nuclear heat or something. This was only about the sanctions. But they made a video, so the teaser, and they combined a couple of clips, and this was spread across the social media in France. They were trying to convince French people that Zelensky is out of his mind, he's crazy, he is not reliable at all. Of course, again, this is very ridiculous, but for some countries and people who do not really follow what is going on between Ukraine and Russia after like 2 years of the war, the full-scale war, this can be also rather fragile, because if we talk about the Russian propaganda, one of the methods to spread it is to use the rotten herring approach. It's when you say something ridiculous about someone or put any allegations or assumptions on a particular person, saying, I don't know, that he might stole something from the store. I don't know, like he is a robber, he is he liked to steal something from different people, and you start spreading those rumors all over. And after even these rumors are debunked, and a person can actually prove that he hasn't stolen anything from the store, he is not the one to blame. You still have this sense of, there is something left after that story was spread, because you still you have some negative feelings toward this person. So this aftermath of spreading the rumors or spreading the very ridiculous fakes is still exists, and it really, if you work with the large quantities of fakes, this effect can accumulate. And month by month, if you receive some ridiculous rumors about Zelensky, or I don't know, any of the Ukrainian authorities, any member of Ukrainian authorities, you start thinking that they probably are not so reliable, they are delusional, they probably need to be paid attention to, because something is going on there, because rumors can spread just, if there is no there is no a reliable suspicion about before the rumors were spread. So it's something like that.
Propaganda always has its consumers. And according to many researchers, Russia divided Ukraine into at least 4 segments: wealth level, education, geography, and worked with each of them. I wonder how Russia works with Western audiences. Is it the same way?
They try to divide their population based on the interests, because, for example, in every country you can find the polarized population regarding different aspects. For example, in France, this probably would be the immigration crisis, or the conflict between the different religions, or the representatives of different nations. In Poland, this can be something between the Democrats and conservative parties. And we saw the latest elections in Poland, how Ukrainian question, let's say, and the attitude towards Ukraine was really important and was crucial for different parties, and the position was different about helping Ukraine and supporting Ukraine. So Russia tries to exploit these groups of people and try to feed them with different information. For example, we live now in the era of social media, and it's easy to see what people are subscribed to, what channels and topics. And if you like to see something like from the side of the conspiracy theories, for example, and you were the anti-vaccinator in the past, for example, so you most likely would believe that there is that the USA is using the Ukraine as a puppet in this war. So Russia would probably target you and try to convince you that actually, yes, the Western world is making a mistake, and it's better to not to follow the rules that US is implementing now, and better to be independent, and let's fight for the independent Europe. That's how actually a lot of the populist parties are rising now in the European Union, and Kremlin also see that. They try to promote a lot of narratives through the political movements and through the political parties. But if we talk about the ordinary people, for example, who just like watching something on the social media, we have a big variety of bloggers who act in Europe, pretending that they are actually European journalists or independent journalists, let's say. And they promote their own views about Ukraine, and they are mostly like pro-Russian views. We debunk a couple of fake, let's say, European experts in StopFake, because in 2022, yes, there were like in France, in Germany, and in the major European countries, a couple of those figures who Kremlin really used for spreading the anti-Ukrainian narratives. One of them was Adrien Bouquet. He became famous in France because he healed himself after a big trauma he got during his military career, and he was already famous because he wrote a book about that. And then Kremlin started using him. He appeared on the French TV and during the live streams with a story how he visited Ukraine and saw he was in Bucha and saw the war crimes of Ukrainian Nazis, and that all the dead people in Bucha actually were shot dead by the Ukrainian Nazis, and he said that he saw that on with his own eyes, and of course it was a lie because he never went to Bucha, and we proved that, and we released an article. It took us like 3 days to collect all the evidence, but this was a huge success because by that time he already attended like 4 TV channels in France. And none of these TV channels really asked any proofs from his side that he actually visited Bucha. This also was a big scandal because we communicated this to the French embassy, and a lot of French media were just shocked about that. So this is how also the media culture is getting more aware about how to actually double check and verify the information. Because if you have a source and he or she is pretending that they know something, then you need to check that first, because otherwise you have a risk that this person won't tell you the truth, but he is lying, and they actually don't care about their reputation. When Kremlin is using someone, they just they don't think about what would be the opposite view on their career or on their views, because they most likely receive money. And now we know that for sure, because after Adrian Baquet was debunked by StopFake and the other French media, he actually moved to Moscow and received the Russian citizenship. So, and he wasn't the only one, of course, and we have plenty of cases like that. Some of them are very vocal. Some of them they work in let's say academics within the academic society, in the universities. Some of them they are the representatives of the political movements, as I already said, and all this, of course, is something that we need to deal with, because diplomacy and the geopolitical influence is the number one target for Russia now. So they will use all the possible resources, and of course, money is not a problem for them.
Yes, unfortunately, money is not a problem for them at all. So,
Yeah.
Oleksandr, thank you very much for this conversation. Thank you for being with us. It was nice talking to you, and thank you for your job, and which is very important.
Watch this.
And almost never do Russian political shows pass without a call for a nuclear attack on Ukraine or the West. At the forefront of this nuclear hysteria is Vladimir Solovyov, the so-called chief propagandist of Russia. Solovyov's guests also resort to such statement. Listen to these experts.
Упреждающий удар по Франции, как стороне конфликта.
If France gets involved in the conflict directly, it should be recognized as a party to the conflict and be destroyed itself. Strike once at France and everyone else will turn up their tails. I assure you. Besides, it won't even require involving our nuclear triad. No, even without it, we have enough firepower, so only dust remains from France or UK for that matter. And no one else gets stabbed.
Франции пыль осталась-то. И больше никому было неповадно. Ну или от Британии.
Experts say that the danger of such propaganda lies not only in its aggressive content, but also in the emotional background against which it is presented. In advocating global destruction, figures like Solovyov portray Russia as the victim. This propaganda creates a narrative in which the Kremlin faces a sinister threat that can only be stopped by a nuclear strike, leaving no room for alternatives. This propaganda encourages Russian citizens to accept the inevitability of nuclear war and the potential necessity of a tactical strike for survival. By the way, Solovyov has various options for harming the countries of the civilized world.
Британия приняла решение, поэтому любая военная цель на территории Франции, Польши и
Any
Британии
military target on the territory of France, Poland and Britain, we have to officially announce, is legitimate target for us to strike.
Но если надо, не ядерным.
If necessary, not nuclear, but if necessary, tactical nuclear.
Ну хорошо, мы стесняемся это сделать, но, пожалуйста, у Вагнеров есть своя техника.
Well, we are ashamed to do it, but the Wagners have their own technique. Well, give them the equipment, let them strike from the territory of Africa. Something will fly from the territory of Africa, say from Libya, and strike France.
Так что ли хотите?
I note that Solovyov is one of the main Russian propagandists. The EU, Great Britain, Canada, Switzerland, Australia, Japan, New Zealand, and of course Ukraine imposed sanctions against him. In the decision of the European Union, it was noted that he is known for his extremely hostile attitude towards Ukraine and glorification of the Russian government. Also popular in Russia is Olga Skobeyeva, who together with her husband Yevgen Popov hosts the 60 Minutes program on Russia One channel. According to the rating of the Russian publication The Insider, Skobeyeva and Popov, as well as Solovyov, are the most famous propagandists of the Kremlin. The European Union, Great Britain, the USA, Canada, Switzerland, Australia, Japan, and of course Ukraine imposed sanctions against Skobeyeva. It wasn't two words, and quite understand it, everything happening on Russian television.
Watch this.
It is difficult to resist the temptation and to ask a question to someone who knows everything. What is informational terrorism?
Informational terrorism, also known as cyberterrorism, is the use of digital technology and the internet to engage in acts of terrorism, primarily through the dissemination of information, disruption of digital systems, and the spread of fear and chaos. It involves various malicious activities conducted in cyberspace with the intent of causing harm or threatening national security, public safety, or social stability. Informational terrorism may include actions such as hacking into critical infrastructure systems, spreading false or harmful information online, launching cyber attacks on government agencies, organizations, or individuals, and using social media and other online platforms to incite violence or create panic. The ultimate goal of informational terrorism is to create fear, disrupt society, and further the objectives of a particular terrorist group or ideology using digital means.
Russia is preparing for the new restrictions on the internet. The next step is blocking YouTube, WhatsApp, Telegram, VPN, and other services, with the help of which Russians can still receive objective information about what is happening in their country and in the world. The Russian Federation is among of the 3 world leaders in the number of downloads of applications that allow bypassing blocking. So that they cannot bypassing, Roskomnadzor plans to stop all VPN services in the country from the 1st of March 2024. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Russia has multiplied the flow of disinformation aimed at destroying Ukraine. Since the latter, the Kremlin media have reported that Ukraine is allegedly selling Western explosives through the darknet, that the US does not have enough money for aid, and that there are some Western plan to make Ukraine disappear from the world map, and many more fakes. Unfortunately, in the era of messengers, information spreads too quickly, and with it, false information. In order to counter this propaganda, the Center of Countering Disinformation at the National Security Council operates in Ukraine. This center has created a wide network of informational distribution covering all popular social networks in Ukraine. When the Russians promote another IPSO or fake, the center explains in detail on social networks and messengers how to recognize it so that there is no doubt that this is disinformation. The organization generally monitors more than 300 Telegram channels, about 200 foreign internet resources, and 11 YouTube channels. And every week, the center has to record up to 200 destructive informational messages. Google removed more than 96,000 videos and 12,000 YouTube channels that were funded by Russia and spread disinformation in Ukraine and abroad. In particular, the propaganda channels RT and Sputnik have already been blocked. Ukraine still lacks the concept of disinformation and means of combating it at the legislatively level, but there is already a draft law on combating disinformation. In addition, in Ukraine, it is proposed to approve the concept of informational terrorism at the international level. Russian propaganda also works in Europe, especially in Eastern Europe. Main narratives: Ukrainians will lose on the battlefield, the economic situation in Europe worsens due to sanctions against Moscow, Ukraine's demand too much, and many more fakes. In social networks and platforms where Europeans sit, openly pro-Kremlin accounts, which are not blocked in the EU, have at least 165 million followers. Their content was viewed at least 16 billion times in less than a year. Across the EU, Kremlin accounts and their affiliates promote the same content. And of course, Elon Musk's X social network. By the way, Musk's platform is the largest means of spreading Russian propaganda. This was stated by the Vice President of the European Commission, Vera Jourova. The EU threatened that if Musk does nothing, the X social network will be threatened with a ban in the EU. In early March, the BBC published the result of its journalistic investigation, which showed that Twitter had stopped fighting Russian and Chinese propaganda. In particular, all restrictions from the Kremlin accounts were removed, and the accounts of Putin and the Russian Foreign Ministry are recommended to users without any restrictions. With the help of all these sources, the Kremlin promotes different narratives in European countries. For example, in Poland, the Kremlin special services traditionally promote the topic of bad Ukrainian refugees. And Moscow speculated on a painful subject for Kiev and Warsaw, the export of Ukrainian food. Propaganda agencies constantly appeared with sarcastic headlines, such as having such an ally as Poland, Ukraine doesn't need enemies. The Hungarian pro-government media often harshly criticize the economic sanctions imposed by the European Union against Russia and the supply of Western weapons for the defense of Ukraine. And the propaganda speculates on the topic of Transcarpathia, saying that Ukraine is oppressing ethnic peoples and Budapest seems to intend, quote, to return its territories. Russian mouthpieces exacerbated the situation with regard to Moldova. Mostly they were connected to Transnistria, which Russian sources portrayed as a potential target for Ukrainian military provocations. As for other countries, such as Slovakia or Baltic states, Russian propaganda scares their population with topics that the war may spread to other Eastern European countries, and other narratives constantly present in the Slovak information space accuse that Western media of bias and spreading lies. And the Russians do not shy away from lying that the West and NATO are responsible for the war in Ukraine. And I'd like to introduce you to my next guest. This is Roman Golovenko, well-educated, clever, and knows almost everything about propaganda.
Watch this.
Let me start with the question, how has Russian propaganda evolved recently? What do you think?
Good evening. Yes, it evolved, and we have noticed that Russians have stopped to label Volodymyr Zelensky as president of Ukraine. It may have some psychological reasons. I'm a lawyer, not a specialist to comment. But there is such a phenomenon. The other is the impact of Israeli-Palestinian war, and it got a lot of attention. But we will see whether it is a clear trend or maybe it's just some correction.
Yeah. We know that propaganda, this is something which exists always. Always. And if we are talking about Russian propaganda, we know that it's many researchers about this, that Russia usually divides people into this segment, I don't know, a wealth level, education, geography, and work with each of them. How Russia divides Ukrainians and how it works?
Yes, it divides Ukrainians because there are different messages for pro-Ukrainian audience and for pro-Russian audience. And there is a middle group between these two points. And for each of these three main groups, there are separate messages, and it also depends on the, for example, Russia may be working uncovered with pro-Russian audience, and the messages for pro-Ukrainian audience should be covered, should be in Ukrainian language. The persons or the bots or some even people who are trying to look like Ukrainians in social media and so on, they should be with black and yellow strips and in Ukrainian language and so on, to be like Ukrainian and to get this audience.
And when we're talking about well-off societies and poor societies, how does Russia propaganda work? Is it any difference between, for example, European Union's countries and African countries? And we know that Russia works everywhere.
Yes, there is difference because European countries, it's not a single group. We have Eastern Europe, which have been in Eastern Bloc, in Warsaw Pact till 1989, and they are aware of what is Russia, at least the elderly people. And Western Europe, it may be more problematic. And talking about African or other, even Asia, people from Asia, it has a lot of affiliation from the past. We may see it even in the Israeli-Palestinian war, because in the past, Soviet Union supported Palestinian and Arab nations, and the United States supported Israel. And from generation to generation, there is a memory about this support, about this affiliation, and they work with it. And also they use some affiliation, like Ukraine is a friend of United States, and if in some countries the United States has not such a good image, it may be used very well by Russian propaganda here.
Returning to the beginning of the full-scale invasion, we remember very well the situation, how the whole world was watched, how Putin tried to grab Ukraine in 3 days. Yes, we all remember about it. Does this mean that Russian pre-war propaganda against Ukraine was sort of effective?
I don't think
the whole world was sort of prepared for this full-scale invasion.
This impact was the result of some prognosis and some of the work of intelligence officers in the West. A lot of intelligence officers predicted that maybe not 3 days, but maybe some weeks, and Ukraine failed. And I don't think that this is result of Russian propaganda. They just have been shocked by the difference in the forces comparing Ukraine and Russia.
And I remember very well, again, returning to the beginning of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, maybe 2 months before, international intelligence, foreign intelligence
predicted.
They informed Ukrainians that it can be like this, the war will come. And why do you think nobody believed in Ukraine?
I don't think nobody believed. A lot of people did not really believe because it was such a terrible scenario that it was very difficult to believe in it, and it looks like that if it came true, their lives will come to the end. Not maybe physically, but I mean in the living conditions, economy, and so on. And maybe minority of Ukrainian population who really believed in the Russian invasion, they were not able to push the public opinion to change the situation and to engage in some preparation, to push the government to engage in some preparation because of such terrible scenario.
Yes. Russia has vast experience in propaganda, especially if we are talking about Ukraine, especially in relation to Ukraine, and Ukraine does not have such experience and has to learn how to deal with it in very short time. And is it successful? What do you think?
Russian propaganda?
Yeah. And our dealing against it.
Russian propaganda lost in 2022 because their terrible mistake about the mood of Ukrainian population. They expected that Ukrainians will welcome Russian forces, Russian army, and so on. And it was very, very big mistake. They themselves failed in this aspect. It's not Ukrainian work or Ukrainian achievement. Talking about the February 2022, the period after, we have a lot of different fight also in information field. But talking about the invasion, it was just miscalculation of Russian top officials who are working in information field.
Do you think that Russian propaganda is a really big threat to the global safety, to the global world?
Yes, it is, because maybe you remember the coronavirus pandemic times, and there was fakes, for example, about laboratories like American laboratories in Ukraine where coronavirus may have been created, and Russian propaganda just tried to engage people in a fight, to engage different social groups from different informational bubbles and with different beliefs to fight, to be angry, and they are just provoking conflict. And it's not only about Ukraine. It's maybe in United States, in Western Europe, and so on.
All information now, it's absolutely impossible to stop because it's a world of social medias and so on. And how much more difficult do social media, messengers, other platforms to make fight against propaganda more difficult?
Yes, it's difficult because social media, these platforms are...
No, maybe it's even help. It's a two-way street. If we want to counter this propaganda, we can use social media as well to beat it, to fight against it.
Yes, but social media, they have a lack of resources. They are trying to fight propaganda with programmatic means because it's too expensive for real people to monitor the messages, to monitor of all of the complaints of the content on social media, and programmatic means they are not able to look at the context of the for example, for the phrase which have been in such a complaint or the sentence, and artificial intelligence is not a human, and that's why it's very difficult to fight propaganda in social media.
Russian propagandists, very dangerous, and they use very dangerous and offensive narratives, not only about Ukraine, but about the political world leaders and etc. This applies to many countries, and personally, as I told leaders of the presidents, and we know Biden, Scholz, they all suffer from this accusation. It is no secret that their salaries are very high, yeah? And many countries have imposed sanctions against him. This is a fact, we know. But they don't seem to be going to stop this dirty business. And what else can be done? And can Russian propagandists be convicted?
Yes, they may be convicted, but the problem is physical availability of the person. If the person lives in Russia and does not visit any other Western countries, yes, this is a problem. But talking about their resources, their salaries, and so on, there is also other aspect. We are talking about physical person, but there is also a media, like a legal entity which have assets, bank accounts, some property, maybe abroad, and it also may be sanctioned. And we should try to cause them problems in the other countries. I mean, even now, even the dissemination of TV and or online media, because every country has a regulative body for informational field, and this regulating body may fine, may sanction the media for some violations, and it depends on the country how its own legislation prescribes what is allowed and what is prohibited, referring regulation of information.
But what about freedom of speech? And I heard the conversation as your colleague, Peter Pomerantsev, you know, of course, and he told that this is really not easy to deal with it, because lawyers refuse to deal with such cases, because they say that, for example, if we're talking about the USA, they say that, have you heard about the First Amendment? And this makes this business very, very difficult.
United States is a very liberal country if you talk about the freedom of speech, but
not only. What about European Union? We are talking about democracy and so on.
European Union, typical European country has much more regulation for informational field, for media, and in some cases the problem is that when the only piece of content is presented for the lawyer, not the monitoring of, I mean, weekly of during the month of the content of this media, but just only one phrase or maybe one article, it may be not enough to to tell about whether it's propaganda, is there maybe this media does not have due impartiality in covering such events, and for example in Great Britain some Russian media have been punished by its regulator Ofcom because of lack of due impartiality, covering some aspects, and we should walk in this direction. Yes, First Amendment and the United States and these social media platforms which are based in the United States. This is problematic, but they are also available in Europe and in other countries, and they are trying to adopt their rules and procedures according to European norms also, because it's too big market to lose for them.
Oh, by the way, I found this bit of texts about Elon Musk platform. Elon Musk platform is the largest means of spreading Russian propaganda. And this was stated by the Vice President of the European Commission, Mira Jourova. The European Union threatened that if Musk does nothing, the X social network will be threatened with a ban in the European Union. Do you believe that the X platform can be banned in EU?
Maybe for some time. And after that, they will reach some agreement with Elon Musk how to adopt the procedures of his social network, and maybe some adopt the interpretation of European norms and so on.
So the work of Russian propagandists is not only a tool for understanding what Russia is, it is also a significant element of the evidence based against Russia. And is this used? And if so, how successful?
It's too early to tell how it is successful, but all our monitorings and our works are sent to General Prosecutor's Office of Ukraine and to National Police of Ukraine, and they have a lot of work right now because it's not informational field is just one of the aspects. There are a lot of war crimes and so on, and they have thousands and even tens of thousands of criminal procedures.
And the next step, as you mentioned, all this is now in the General Prosecutor of Ukraine office, yes, and it's the rock of these cases. And then the next step, what has to be done to bring it to the end?
My position is that we should use all the tools, I mean international court or Ukrainian courts and so on, to bring Russian propagandists to justice. And it's quite difficult. We should consider all the types of content, all the messages, statements, because it depends. The sense of every statement should be weighed, and the person who produced or published this content. And after that, we will be able to choose what way is the best. It's Ukrainian legislation or some international norms, because there are a very huge number of Russian propagandists. And it's impossible all of them to be covered by the, for example, Convention on Prevention of the Crime of Genocide, other conventions preventing aggressive war, and so on. We should consider every case by case, and such a much more suitable tool for every aspect, for every case.
Does the Western audience now understand clear the difference between Russian people and Ukrainian people, that we are absolutely different, that Ukraine and Russia is absolutely different countries, and not because of the war, of course, and that we have nothing in common, actually. And are they understand clear this difference between Russia and Ukraine?
They understand the difference because of the war, and there is a lack of information about Ukraine. What is Ukraine? What is
So far.
Ukrainian culture? What is
Even
Ukrainian
so far.
history? And even the personalities of Ukrainian culture and so on, they often have been regarded by Russia as their own part of cultural or historical heritage and so on. And we should work with this problem. The problem is that Russia has much more resources and even much more population, which means that this population also produces a content, and it's bigger country in all aspects.
Yes, this is a bigger country, much more bigger. But did Ukraine take all advantages of the window of opportunity when the world's attention to it was the greatest, and deliver the right messages about itself to the world?
It seems to me that Ukraine have been focused on urgent issues, but not the strategic issues. I mean that Russia is a permanent threat, not only to Ukraine, and some end or finish of the Russo-Ukrainian war will not be the end of the story. It not be, and the death of Putin will not be the end of this story. It's maybe natural that we have been focused on urgent issues, but we should transfer the attention of Western audience to this strategic issue and this fight for years.
Mm. So, if we're talking about the situation in our media, in Ukrainian's media world, is it a single marathon as a good idea to counter propaganda? Can Russia use the fact of the existence of a single marathon in Ukraine as an argument for the lack of democracy in the country?
I did not notice that they use this argument, and maybe it would be good argument for Western audiences, but it's not natural for Russian mentality is for me, because according to Russian mentality, if the country is in the war, there should be one voice, one united TV channel, and so on.
Mm. But actually, I heard a lot about it, about this issue that Ukraine, this is only one channel in Ukraine, and if we're talking about democracy, we have to strengthen democracy in Ukraine, and we have to make Ukrainian officials to do something with this situation. Okay, but this is your answer. And who do you think is the real leaders of thoughts in Ukraine?
It depends on informational bubble. It may be, for some people, it may be Valery Pekar or Volodymyr Vyatrovich, and for some people, Alexei Arestovich, and so on. It's difficult in digital age. It's very difficult.
Mm-hmm. So, and maybe it's not serious a question, but it seems it depends on translating into sports vocabulary. What would be your advice to Ukraine? Strengthen the defense, be more active in attack, or concentrated on building your own positive image?
I think building the image.
To build the image, not to go to attack.
It's almost 2 years of Russian full-scale invasion, and also we have on the back the Israeli-Palestinian war, and we should concentrate on our image. Why Ukraine is important for the world.
And what will be your answer? Why Ukraine is so important to the world?
Ukraine is part of Europe, and existence of Ukraine is very important for the Western world and for democratic world. And it's not just a conflict between two countries about the territory and so on. It's the war which started because of different beliefs of the two different nations with different attitudes of their way of living.
Yes, and of course, this is the issue of global safety and how to live further, how to move further in this world. IPSO is one of the big part of the propaganda. And whose IPSO is now winning, Russian or Ukrainian?
I'm not psychologist to comment which IPSO is more efficient, because we should know who is who have been targeted by this IPSO, and we are not we have not seen usually the whole story, the all aspects of this IPSO.
Yes. So, Roman, thank you very much for being with us, and it was interesting to talk to you. And once again, Roman Golovenko, Head of Legal Department of Institute of Mass Information Ukraine 5 AM Coalition.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Media literacy, critical thinking, support of independent mass media and fact-checking. You and I are on our way to not getting caught by the Kremlin's mouthpiece. Let's be careful. Stay with the gaze.